Jessica stood at the top of the grand marble staircase of the Cho estate, her custom silk gown shimmering under the crystal chandeliers like liquid gold. Her dark skin glowed against the champagne fabric, her braids swept into an elegant updo adorned with diamonds that caught the light with every breath. 500 of Seoul's most powerful elites raised their glasses below, toasting to 3 years of unbreakable union. She smiled, her hand instinctively moving to the tiny ultrasound picture hidden in her clutch, the surprise that would change everything. Then, the massive projector screens flickered to life. The tribute video she'd carefully prepared never played. Instead, the screens filled with a different image, her husband, Cho Yang-yoon. The feared head of the Cho syndicate stood in the estate's coat room with another woman pressed close to him. His hands rested firmly at Minna's waist, a familiarity Jessica had not felt in months. The woman's red lips brushed his neck as she leaned into him, her fingers tangled in his hair. He did not pull away. Instead, he held her as if the rest of the world did not exist. Jessica froze, the sight draining all warmth from her blood. The ballroom fell silent. Crystal stopped clinking. Conversations died mid-sentence. 500 pairs of eyes turned from the screens to Jessica, frozen under the spotlight like a specimen pinned for examination. Yang-eun appeared at the edge of the ballroom, Minna's lipstick still staining his collar. He didn't run. He didn't apologize. He walked to the stage with the same cold calculation he used to dismantle rival gangs, his sharp jawline set, his three-piece charcoal suit immaculate, despite the betrayal it concealed. He took the microphone, and when his tired, predatory eyes met Jessica's, there wasn't even a flicker of remorse. "Every contract has an expiration date," he said, his voice cutting through the suffocating silence like a blade. "Ours ends tonight." He crossed the ballroom floor, climbed the stairs, and extended his hand, not to comfort her, but to present her with divorce papers. The cameras flashed, the paparazzi circled like vultures, and Jessica, with the ultrasound of their children pressed against her heart, realized she'd never meant anything more to him than a signature on a contract. What happens when Jessica returns 5 years later with 4 carbon copies of the man who threw her away? Welcome to Seoul Africa Stories. Besties, subscribe if you are new to the channel, like and drop a comment if you need to see Yang-yoon's face when he realizes what he lost. And also tell me in the comments what country you're watching from. I want to personally say hello and see how far this story reaches. Now, Jessica's fingers closed around the ultrasound image as Yang-yoon descended the stairs, the divorce papers still extended toward her like a weapon. The ballroom held its breath. She could feel every eye on her, waiting to see if the discarded wife would crumble, would beg, would make a scene worthy of tomorrow's headlines. Instead, she took the papers. Her hands didn't shake, her voice didn't break. "I understand," she said, and the steadiness of her tone seemed to unsettle him more than tears ever could. Yang-eun's expression flickered, just for a moment, before the ice reformed. "You'll have 72 hours to vacate the residence. My attorney will handle the details." He turned to leave, then paused. "And Jessica? Whatever complications resulted from our arrangement, I trust you'll handle them appropriately. The Cho bloodline doesn't need dilution." The ultrasound in her clutch suddenly felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He didn't know. He thought she was just another discarded piece of his empire, unaware that she carried 4 pieces of his legacy beneath her heart. Minna appeared at his elbow, her designer gown glittering with crystals that screamed of desperation dressed as confidence. Her makeup was flawless, but it couldn't hide the triumph in her eyes as she looked at Jessica. "Some women are meant to be wives," she said, her voice sugared with venom. "Others are just meant to be temporary." Yang-eun didn't correct her. He simply placed his hand on Minna's lower back and guided her toward the crowd, leaving Jessica alone on the staircase like a portrait that no longer matched the decor. The guests began to murmur. Cameras flashed, and Jessica, still clutching the ultrasound of 4 children who would never know their father, walked down the stairs with her head high and disappeared into the Seoul night. 23 hours later, Jessica sat in a private medical clinic, staring at the ultrasound screen as the doctor pointed to 4 distinct heartbeats. "Quadruplets," the doctor said, her voice a mixture of awe and concern. 2 boys, 2 girls. It's incredibly rare, and given the circumstances, you'll need excellent prenatal care." "Not in Seoul," Jessica whispered. "I need to leave. Tonight." The doctor's eyes filled with understanding. She'd seen the news. Everyone had. I have a colleague in London. Let me make a call. By midnight, Jessica was in her former home, the sprawling Cho estate that had never truly felt like hers, packing a single suitcase. Everything else, the designer clothes, the jewelry, the carefully curated life, belonged to a woman who no longer existed. She took her passport, her architecture portfolio, and the ultrasound image. Nothing else mattered. The gate guard didn't stop her when she left. Yang Eun's orders had been clear. She was already gone. At Incheon Airport, Jessica stood at the departure gate, her hand pressed against her stomach where 4 tiny lives grew. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something unexpected: relief. For 3 years, she'd molded herself into the perfect wife for a man who treated marriage like a business merger. She'd silenced her opinions, dimmed her brilliance, made herself smaller so he could feel larger. No more. The flight to London was 13 hours long. Jessica spent every moment planning. She had her savings, money she'd earned from freelance architectural projects Yang Eun had never bothered to ask about. She had her degree from one of the top architecture programs in the world. And she had something Yang Eun would never understand: the ability to build something from nothing. When the plane touched down at Heathrow, a black car was waiting. The driver held a sign with her name, but it wasn't her name anymore. It read Ms. J. Okonkwo, her maiden name, the name of her father, the name she should never have given up. The car took her to a townhouse in Kensington. The door opened before she could knock, and a man stepped out, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, wearing a perfectly tailored suit that spoke of wealth earned, not inherited. Park Jin-ho, formerly of the Seoul Underground, now a legitimate businessman in London. He'd been Yang Eun's rival once, before Yang Eun had forced him out of Korea with threats and calculated moves. Ms. Okonkwo, Jin-ho said, extending his hand. I received Dr. Kim's call. Welcome to London. Jessica studied him carefully. Why would you help me? You know who my husband is. Former husband, Jin-ho corrected with a slight smile. And I'm helping you precisely because I know who he is. Yang Eun believes people are chess pieces to be moved and discarded. You're about to prove him wrong. He gestured toward the townhouse. This property is yours, no strings attached. Consider it an investment in the future. I don't accept charity, Jessica said. It's not charity, it's strategy. Jin-ho's eyes glinted. Yang Eun destroyed many things when he took control of Seoul, but he made one critical error. He underestimated everyone who wasn't him. You have 5 months until those children arrive. Use them to become someone he can never dismiss again. Jessica looked at the townhouse, then at Jin-ho, then down at her stomach. I will. The next 5 months were a blur of preparation. Jessica enrolled in an advanced architectural certification program, adding British qualifications to her already impressive credentials. She worked with Jin-ho's network, building connections with Europe's top architectural firms. She attended prenatal appointments, ate properly, rested when her body demanded it, and spent every other waking moment designing. Her portfolio grew. Buildings that sang with innovation, structures that honored heritage while embracing the future. Designs that made senior architects pause and ask, who is this woman? When the contractions started on a rainy March morning, Jessica was in the middle of sketching a cultural center. She calmly closed her portfolio, called her doctor, and took a taxi to the hospital. Jin-ho met her there, not as a friend, they weren't friends, but as the closest thing she had to family in this new world. The delivery took 14 hours. When it was over, Jessica held 4 tiny humans, each one perfect and impossibly small. The boys had Yang Eun's sharp features softened by her own gentle curves. The girls had her soulful eyes framed by Yang Eun's distinctive brow. They looked like little royals, just as they were, though their father would never know. Names? The nurse asked. Jessica looked at her children, these 4 pieces of her heart that she'd carried through abandonment and exile. Zuri and Amara, she said, nodding toward the girls. Kofi and Malik, she said, looking at the boys. Each name meant something. Beautiful. Grace. Born on Friday. King. They would know their heritage, both sides of it, even if their father never acknowledged them. Quick pause before we go on. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel, and then we'll continue. The years that followed were a careful construction. Each day, a brick in the empire Jessica was building. She worked from home initially, taking projects she could complete while the quadruplets slept. As they grew, she hired a nanny, a kind woman named Margaret, who treated the children like her own grandchildren. Jessica's reputation grew. Her designs won awards. Firms across Europe sought her expertise. And when the children turned 3, she opened her own practice, Okonkwo International Architecture. Her first major project was a museum in Barcelona. Her second was a sustainable housing complex in Amsterdam. Her third was a government building in Oslo. By the time the children were 5, Jessica's name was spoken in the same breath as the world's architectural legends. She was the woman who'd revolutionized cultural spaces, who understood how to make buildings breathe with the soul of their communities. She dressed in impeccably tailored power suits in cream and emerald, her hair styled in sharp bobs or intricate braids that celebrated her heritage. When she walked into a room, conversations paused, not because of scandal, but because of respect. The children grew into remarkable humans. Zuri was quiet but observant, with a mind that absorbed everything like a sponge. Amara was bold and fearless, always the first to try something new. Kofi was gentle and thoughtful, already showing an artistic temperament. Malik was protective and strategic, always watching over his siblings with careful eyes. They wore miniature designer suits and high-end dresses, not because Jessica was trying to prove anything, but because she wanted them to know their worth. They attended the best schools. They spoke 3 languages. They knew they were loved beyond measure. And they never asked about their father, because Jessica had told them a simple truth. Some people don't know how to see treasure when it's right in front of them. But that's okay, because we see each other, and that's what matters. Then came the phone call that changed everything. Jessica was in her London office, reviewing designs, when her assistant buzzed through. "Miss Okonkwo, there's a call from the Seoul Metropolitan Development Authority. They're requesting a meeting about the Hanggang Cultural Complex project." Jessica's pen stopped mid-stroke. The Hanggang Complex was the most ambitious urban redevelopment project in South Korea's history, a $5 billion undertaking that would reshape Seoul's waterfront. Every major architectural firm in the world had submitted proposals. Jessica had submitted hers 3 months ago, never truly believing she'd be selected. "They want me?" Jessica asked. "They want to offer you the lead position, but there's a condition. You'd need to relocate to Seoul for the 3-year construction period." Seoul, the city that had spit her out like something distasteful. The city where Yang-eun still ruled his empire from the shadows. The city that had watched her humiliation and done nothing. Jessica looked at the photograph on her desk, her 4 children on their 5th birthday, laughing as they destroyed a cake shaped like a castle. They deserved to know their heritage. Both sides of it, and Yang-eun deserved to see exactly what he'd thrown away. "Tell them yes," Jessica said. "We'll be there in 3 weeks." Margaret helped her pack, asking no questions but offering knowing looks. Jinho called to offer support and resources. "He'll find out you're back within days," Jinho warned. "Are you ready for that?" "He's not ready for me," Jessica replied. The flight to Seoul was different from the one she'd taken 5 years earlier. This time, she wasn't fleeing. This time, she had 4 children in first class with her, each one excited about the adventure. This time, she was returning as someone who'd built an empire from the ashes of her broken marriage. Incheon Airport was exactly as she remembered, but Jessica was nothing like the woman who'd left. She walked through customs with her head high, her children holding hands in a perfect line, her assistant managing the logistics. Cameras flashed. Someone had tipped off the press about the famous architect's arrival, but Jessica simply smiled and kept walking. The company had arranged a penthouse apartment in Gangnam, far from the Cho estate, but close enough to the project site. The children loved it immediately, running from room to room, claiming spaces, planning where their toys would go. That night, after the children were asleep, Jessica stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at Seoul's glittering skyline. Somewhere in that sea of lights, Yang-eun was living his life, probably still with Minna, probably never thinking about the wife he'd discarded. He was about to learn a very painful lesson. Some things, once thrown away, come back stronger than before. The first week passed quietly. Jessica toured the project site, met with contractors, reviewed plans. She kept a low profile, focusing on work, keeping the children's schedules private. They attended an international school under tight security, not because she was paranoid, but because she was careful. On the 8th day, Jessica took the children to Hanggang Park. It was a Sunday afternoon, warm and perfect, and the kids needed to run and play after a week of adjustments. She sat on a bench, watching them climb and laugh, their joy so pure it made her chest ache. She didn't see him approach, didn't sense the shift in the air until a shadow fell across her bench. Jessica. His voice was exactly as she remembered, cold, controlled, sharp as a blade. She looked up slowly, letting him see the complete absence of emotion on her face. Yang-eun stood there in charcoal slacks and a crisp white shirt, his predatory jawline as sharp as ever, his eyes tired in a way that 5 years hadn't erased. "Mr. Cho," she said, her voice professionally pleasant, as if he were a stranger. What an unexpected encounter. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, that she wasn't falling apart at the sight of him. His eyes moved past her to the playground, and Jessica saw the exact moment he registered the children. 4 children. 4 5-year-olds with his distinctive brow and hair texture, with features that were unmistakably Cho combined with unmistakably Okonkwo. 4 children who were laughing and playing, completely unaware that their father was standing 30 feet away, staring at them like he'd seen a ghost. Yang-eun's face went pale. His jaw clenched. When his eyes snapped back to Jessica, there was something in them she'd never seen before. Shock, so complete it shattered his carefully maintained control. "Those children," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me those aren't. They're none of your concern." Jessica interrupted, standing up and smoothing her emerald power suit. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to collect my family." She walked toward the playground, calling her children's names. They ran to her immediately, and she herded them toward the parking lot without looking back. But she could feel Yang-eun's eyes on them, could sense his world tilting on its axis. Good. Let him wonder. Let him realize what he'd thrown away. Let him understand that the woman he'd discarded had become someone far more powerful than he'd ever imagined. The war had just begun, and this time, Jessica was holding all the cards. If you're hooked and need to see what Yang-eun does next, drop a in the comments and tell me which character you're rooting for, Jessica or the quadruplets. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss what happens when Yang-eun tries to claim what he abandoned. Let me know what city you're watching from. I love saying hello to everyone following this story. Jessica didn't sleep that night. She stood at the penthouse windows watching Seoul's lights blur through her exhaustion, knowing that Yang-eun would come. Men like him didn't accept mysteries. They tore them apart until they found answers, consequences be damned. She'd seen it in his eyes at the park. The shock, yes, but beneath it, the calculation. He was already planning his next move, already deciding how to reclaim what he'd discarded, like it had never been his choice to throw it away. The children slept peacefully, unaware that their world was about to become complicated. Margaret had put them to bed with stories and lullabies, the same routine they'd had for 5 years. Jessica wouldn't let Yang-eun disrupt that. Not now. Not ever. Her phone buzzed at 3 in the morning, an unknown number. She let it ring through to voicemail, then listened to the message with her heart steady and cold. Jessica. Yang-eun's voice was different now, not the ice she remembered, but something rougher, almost desperate. "We need to talk. Those children, I need to know. Call me back." She deleted the message and blocked the number. By 6 a.m., she was dressed in a cream power suit, her hair pulled back in an elegant bun, her expression carefully neutral. She had a site meeting at 7, then back-to-back consultations until 3. She designed her schedule to be impenetrable, but she should have known better than to think walls could keep Yang-eun out. Her assistant buzzed through at 9:30, her voice tight with anxiety. "Miss Okonkwo, there's a Mr. Cho here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says he'll wait as long as necessary." Jessica's pen didn't falter on the blueprint she was reviewing. "Tell Mr. Cho that I don't take walk-in meetings. He can submit a request through proper channels. He says it's personal. Then he definitely needs to go through proper channels." There was a pause, then sounds of a commotion. Her office door opened despite her assistant's protests, and Yang-eun walked in like he owned the building. He'd aged in 5 years, not badly, but noticeably. The lines around his eyes were deeper, his jaw tighter, his entire posture carrying a weight that hadn't been there before. Jessica didn't stand, didn't acknowledge his entrance beyond a glance. She simply continued reviewing her blueprints, letting him stand there like a supplicant waiting for an audience. "Jessica. Miss Okonkwo," she corrected, not looking up. "We're not on familiar terms, Mr. Cho, and you're interrupting my work." She heard his sharp intake of breath, saw him move closer to her desk, his hands gripping the back of the visitor's chair. Those children at the park, they're mine. They're mine, Jessica replied, finally meeting his eyes with a gaze so cold it could have frozen fire. And I'd appreciate it if you didn't approach my family again without permission. Your family? Yangon's voice rose slightly, the control slipping. Jessica, they have my face, my eyes. They're 5 years old, which means if you're trying to claim some connection, you should ask yourself where you were when they were born, where you were when they learned to walk, where you were when they said their first words. Jessica set down her pen with deliberate precision. Oh, that's right. You were busy choosing bloodline purity over the woman carrying your children. The color drained from Yangun's face. You were pregnant. That night. You were pregnant. I was, and you handed me divorce papers and told me to handle the complication appropriately. Jessica stood now, her 5'8" frame somehow seeming taller than his 6 feet. I did. I handled it by building a life where my children would never know what it feels like to be called a complication by their own father. Yangun gripped the chair harder, his knuckles white. I need a DNA test. No. Jessica. Miss Okonkwo, she corrected again. And no, you don't get to demand anything. You terminated your rights the night you chose Minna. You don't get to show up 5 years later because you saw 4 children who might inconvenience your carefully constructed life. Inconvenience? Yangun's voice was raw now, the ice cracking. Those are my heirs, my legacy. Do you understand what this means? I understand that you see children as assets, which is exactly why you'll never be their father. Jessica walked to her office door and opened it. This meeting is over. Please leave, or I'll have security escort you out. Yangun didn't move. He stood there, staring at her like she was a stranger, like the obedient wife he'd married had been replaced by someone he couldn't recognize. 5 years ago, you would never have spoken to me this way. 5 years ago, I was a different person. She died the night you humiliated her in front of 500 people. Jessica's voice didn't waver. The woman standing before you now is someone you created, someone you taught that love is weakness and loyalty is currency. Congratulations on your excellent lesson, Mr. Cho. Now leave. I have work to do. He walked to the door, paused. This isn't over. For you, it never started. Jessica closed the door behind him and returned to her desk, her hands perfectly steady, even as her heart hammered. She'd known this confrontation was coming, had prepared for it, but seeing Yang Eun's face when she'd refused him had been more satisfying than she'd expected. Her assistant appeared moments later, eyes wide. Miss Okonkwo, are you all right? Should I call security? I'm fine, but add Mr. Cho to the restricted visitors list. He's not to be admitted to this building again without my express written permission. The rest of the day passed in a blur of meetings and conference calls, but Jessica's mind kept circling back to Yang Eun's expression. The desperation she'd seen there was dangerous. Desperate men made reckless choices, and she needed to be prepared for whatever he might do next. That afternoon, Jessica picked up the children from school herself, something she tried to do at least 3 times a week. They piled into her car with their usual chaos, backpacks flying, everyone talking at once, showing her art projects and spelling tests. Mama, there was a man watching our school today, Malik said as Jessica buckled him in. He was sitting in a black car across the street. Jessica's blood went cold, but she kept her voice calm. What did the man look like, sweetheart? I don't know. I couldn't see him good, but he was there a long time. Teacher Kim noticed too. She said something to the principal. Did the man try to talk to anyone? No, he just sat there. It was weird. Zuri piped up from the back seat. I saw him too, Mama. He looked sad. Jessica's jaw tightened. Yangun. It had to be. She glanced in the rearview mirror at her 4 children, so innocent, so unaware of the storm gathering around them. If you ever see anyone watching you, anyone at all, you tell your teachers immediately, and you never, ever go near a stranger's car, understood? Yes, Mama, they chorused. That night, after the children were asleep, Jessica made 3 phone calls. The first was to a private security firm that specialized in family protection. The second was to the school, requesting enhanced security protocols and a meeting with the principal. The third was to her attorney, a sharp woman named Kim Sun-hee, who'd built her reputation defending people from powerful enemies. I need documents prepared, Jessica said. Legal barriers, restraining orders if necessary, and I need them ironclad. Against Cho Yang-eun? Sun-hee's voice was careful. You understand what you're asking? The Cho family has resources, connections. They can make legal proceedings very difficult. So do I, Jessica interrupted. And I'm protecting my children. Draw up the papers. I want them ready by tomorrow afternoon. And Sunhee, make them so tight that even breathing near my family without permission becomes a legal violation. Consider it done. Jessica hung up and poured herself a glass of wine, standing once again at those floor-to-ceiling windows. Seoul spread out before her like a chessboard, and she was planning moves Yang Yun couldn't even imagine yet. He thought he could intimidate her into compliance, could use his presence to wear down her defenses. He didn't understand that she'd spent 5 years building walls he couldn't scale. The next morning brought a surprise. Jessica arrived at her office to find a massive bouquet of white orchids on her desk, easily $500 worth of flowers arranged in a crystal vase. The card read simply, "Please, let me explain." Jessica handed the entire arrangement to her assistant. "Donate these to the hospital down the street, and if any more gifts arrive from Mr. Cho, do the same. I don't want them in my office." By week's end, Yang Eun had tried to approach her 4 more times. At the project site, where her security team intercepted him before he could reach her trailer. At a professional dinner, where she simply stood and left the moment he entered. At a charity gala she couldn't avoid, where she spent the entire evening surrounded by colleagues, making conversation impossible. Each time she made it clear, he had no rights, no claims, no access. She watched him grow more desperate, more unraveled. The controlled Mafia boss was cracking, and it would have been amusing if it weren't so dangerous. Desperate men made terrible decisions, and Yang Yun was clearly approaching his breaking point. What Jessica didn't anticipate was Minna. The woman appeared at Jessica's office on a Tuesday morning, dressed in head-to-toe designer labels that screamed new wealth, trying to look old. Her makeup was heavy, caked on like armor, but it couldn't hide the panic in her eyes or the tight set of her mouth. "We need to talk," Minna said, pushing past Jessica's assistant like she had any authority to do so. Jessica looked up from her desk, unimpressed. "No, we don't. Please leave." "Those children aren't his," Minna hissed, closing the office door with more force than necessary. "I know what you're doing. You found some kids who look vaguely Asian, and you're trying to manipulate Yang-eun into believing they're his heirs. It's pathetic and transparent." Jessica leaned back in her chair, studying the woman who'd helped destroy her marriage. Mina looked different than she had 5 years ago. Harder, more brittle, like something that might shatter if you pressed too hard. "Is that what you came here to say? Because if so, you've wasted a trip. I came here to warn you." Minna's voice dropped, venom coating every word. "Yangun is mine. I've spent 5 years securing my position. I won't let some foreign woman with fabricated children ruin what I've built." "Foreign woman?" Jessica repeated softly, each word precise as a scalpel. "Interesting. Tell me, Minna, how secure is your position, really? Because from where I'm sitting, a woman who has to threaten her predecessor isn't very secure at all." Minna's composure slipped, just for a moment, her hands clenched at her sides. "I'm his partner, his equal. I stand beside him at every event, every business meeting." "You stand beside him because he allows it," Jessica interrupted. "I stood beside him once, too. Look how that ended. What makes you think your position is any more permanent than mine was?" "Because I'm Korean," Minna spat. "Because I understand what the Cho family needs. Because I can give him—" She stopped abruptly, but the damage was done. "Can give him what?" Jessica asked, genuine curiosity in her voice now. "Heirs? Is that what you were going to say? How's that working out for you, Minna?" The other woman's face went pale, then red. "Stay away from him. Keep your children away from him. Or You'll what?" Jessica stood, and there was something in her posture that made Minna take an involuntary step backward. "Threaten me? Threaten my children? Please do. I'd love to add harassment charges to the restraining order I'm already preparing. I'd especially love to explain to a judge why you think you have any say in my family's life." Minna's eyes widened. "Restraining order? Against anyone who poses a threat to my family, including desperate women who built their entire identity on being chosen over someone else." Jessica walked to her door and opened it, her movements calm and controlled. "Now leave, and if you come near me or my children again, you'll discover exactly how resourceful this foreign woman can be. I survived being publicly discarded by your precious Yang Yun. I built an international career from nothing. I raised 4 children alone in a foreign country. What exactly do you think you can do to me that's worse than what I've already survived?" Mina's mouth opened and closed, no words coming out. Finally, she grabbed her designer handbag and stalked toward the door. But she paused at the threshold, turning back with one last attempt at superiority. You think you've won something, but Yang-un will never accept those children. He'll never believe they're his without proof, and you're too proud to give it to him. You're right about one thing, Jessica said softly. I am too proud. Too proud to let a man who called my children a complication play father when it becomes convenient for him. Too proud to let someone who threw me away claim my babies as assets. But mostly, Minna, I'm too smart to let my children anywhere near a man who measures worth by bloodline and treats people like contracts with expiration dates. Minna left, but the look in her eyes promised this wasn't over. Jessica closed her door and leaned against it, allowing herself exactly 30 seconds of reaction. Her hands shook slightly. Her breath came faster. Then she straightened, smoothed her suit, and went back to work. But she also immediately called her security team. I need increased protection, she told the head of security, a former military man named James Park. Double the detail on the children. I want eyes on them every second they're outside our home. And I need background monitoring on a woman named Minna. I'll send you her information. Threat level? James asked. High. She's desperate and connected. Assume she'll escalate. Understood. I'll have the new protocols in place by this afternoon. Jessica increased security immediately. 2 guards for the children at all times, dressed casually enough not to frighten them, but close enough to intercept any threat. Advanced monitoring of their school, with cameras at every entrance and exit. Background checks on every person who came within 50 feet of them. Teachers, other parents, maintenance staff. It seemed excessive until 3 days later, when one of the guards reported an attempted breach. A woman tried to approach the children at the park, James explained, showing Jessica the security footage on his tablet. She claimed to be a family friend, said she wanted to say hello to the adorable quadruplets. When we blocked her and asked for identification, she became aggressive. Started shouting about her rights to see them. Jessica watched the footage, her jaw so tight it ached. Minna. The woman had actually tried to get to her children. On the screen, Minna was arguing with the security guard, her face twisted with rage, her expensive handbag swinging as she gestured wildly. What happened? Jessica asked, her voice deadly calm. We removed her from the premises immediately, filed a report with local authorities, and I took the liberty of forwarding everything to your attorney, Miss Kim. I also flagged her in our facial recognition system. If she comes within 200 meters of any location your children frequent, we'll know immediately. Good. Jessica's voice was ice. From now on, the children don't go to public parks, private play areas only, vetted and secured. And I want facial recognition software installed at every entrance to our building, our office, and their school. Cost is irrelevant. Their safety isn't. James nodded. Already in progress. But Miss Okonkwo, there's something else you should know. We've detected at least 3 other surveillance attempts. Different people, different vehicles, but all watching your family. This is organized. Jessica felt her blood run cold. Yang-un, that would be my assessment. He's trying to gather information, build a case maybe, or he's just trying to understand what he's dealing with. He's dealing with a mother who will do anything to protect her children, Jessica said flatly. Make sure he understands that. Legally, publicly, whatever it takes. That evening, Jessica sat with the quadruplets after dinner, watching them play with their toys, unaware of the danger circling them. Zuri was building an intricate tower with blocks, her concentration absolute. Amara was directing her brothers in some elaborate game involving stuffed animals and a pretend kingdom. Kofi was drawing on a large pad, his tongue sticking out slightly, the way it always did when he focused. Malik was watching everyone, making sure his siblings were happy and safe. They were perfect. They were hers. And she would burn Soul to the ground before she let anyone hurt them. Her phone rang. Yang-yun's new number. He'd found a way around her blocks. She answered this time, her voice deadly calm. What? Jessica, please. His voice sounded rough, like he hadn't slept. I just want to meet them. Just once. I need to know. You need to know nothing, Jessica interrupted. Your companion tried to approach my children today. She tried to get past their security. She shouted at trained professionals and made a scene in front of my babies. If you can't control the woman you chose over me, then you're even more pathetic than I thought. There was silence on the line. Then, Minna did what? Ask her yourself. But understand this, Yang-yun, If she comes near my children again, if you come near my children again without my explicit permission, I will use every resource I have to destroy you. And I have considerable resources now. I'm not the woman you discarded. I'm the woman you created when you threw me away. And I promise you, you don't want to see what I'm capable of when someone threatens my family. Jessica, I watched your face at that park. I saw you recognize them. I saw you realize what you threw away. Jessica's voice was soft now, but there was steel beneath the silk. And I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, nothing. Because those children are mine. They've always been mine. You're just a biological detail, and biology doesn't make you a father. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to call off your surveillance. You're going to control your companion. And you're going to stay away from my family. Because the alternative is that I make the next 5 years of your life a legal nightmare that will cost you more than you can imagine. She hung up and blocked the new number, her hands steady. Margaret appeared in the doorway of the living room. Everything all right? Everything's fine, Jessica lied smoothly. Just work complications. But that night, after the children were finally asleep, Jessica sat at her laptop and composed an email. It went to Yang Eun's business address, one he couldn't block or ignore without looking unprofessional. Mr. Cho, given recent events, it has become clear that we need to establish boundaries. You attempted to surveil my children. Your companion attempted to approach them without authorization. These actions constitute harassment under South Korean law. I am prepared to file formal complaints if this behavior continues. However, I am also prepared to offer you an alternative. You have earned nothing. You deserve nothing. But for reasons I'm still questioning, I'm willing to grant you 5 minutes. Tomorrow, my office, noon. Come alone or don't come at all. This is not a negotiation. This is the only opportunity you will receive. What you do with it is your choice. J. Okonkwo. She hit send before she could second-guess herself. His response was immediate, arriving less than 60 seconds later. I'll be there. Thank you. Jessica closed her laptop and looked out at Seoul's skyline. The city glittered with possibility and danger, just like it had 5 years ago. But this time, she wasn't the naive woman hoping for love. She was the architect of her own empire, and she was about to teach Yang Eun the most expensive lesson of his life. Tomorrow, he would walk into her office expecting answers, expecting access, expecting that somehow his presence and his regret would be enough. He would learn that the woman who'd once loved him was gone, replaced by someone far more formidable. Someone who'd built walls he couldn't scale and armor he couldn't penetrate. The war was escalating, but Jessica had always been good at strategy, and she'd learned from the master. The man who'd discarded her had taught her exactly how ruthless you had to be to survive in a world that wanted to break you. She just hoped he was ready to face the student who'd surpassed the teacher. Because tomorrow, Yang Eun would discover that some things, once thrown away, never come back. And some women, once broken, rebuild themselves into something unbreakable. Jessica returned to the living room where her children's toys were still scattered across the expensive rug. She picked up a stuffed elephant that belonged to Zuri, a toy robot that was Malik's favorite, one of Amara's dress-up crowns, and a drawing pad filled with Kofi's artwork. These were her treasures. These were her legacy. Not the Cho Empire, not Yang Eun's bloodline, not Minna's desperate claims to status. Just 4 beautiful children who called her mama and had never known the sting of their father's rejection. And tomorrow, she would make sure Yang Eun understood exactly what that meant. If you're hooked and need to see what happens when Yang Eun finally gets his 5 minutes with Jessica, smash that subscribe button now and drop in the comments. And tell me, do you think Yang Eun deserves any chance to meet the quadruplets, or is Jessica absolutely right to keep them far away from him? Drop your honest thoughts below and let me know what country you're watching from. I'm reading every single comment. Yang Eun arrived at Jessica's office exactly at noon, alone as instructed. He wore a different suit than usual, navy instead of charcoal, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. The predatory sharpness was still there in his jawline, but something else had crept in, uncertainty. Jessica had never seen him uncertain about anything. She made him wait in the lobby for 7 minutes, not out of pettiness, but because she was finishing a call with contractors. When her assistant finally showed him in, Jessica was standing by the window, her emerald suit immaculate, her posture radiating the kind of confidence that came from building an empire with her own hands. 5 minutes, she said without turning around. starting now. Yang-eun closed the door quietly behind him. Thank you for agreeing to see me. 4 minutes and 40 seconds. She heard him exhale slowly. I was wrong. That night at the gala, I was wrong. I thought I was making a strategic decision for the family, for the legacy. You thought a lot of things, Jessica interrupted, finally turning to face him. You thought I was temporary. You thought bloodline mattered more than loyalty. You thought you could discard me like a contract that had expired and I would simply disappear. So tell me, Yang-eun, what changed? Why do you suddenly care about children you called a complication 5 years ago? Because I saw them. His voice cracked slightly. I saw their faces and I realized what I'd done, what I'd thrown away. You threw away a wife, a partner, someone who loved you despite your world, despite your coldness, despite everything. Jessica's voice was steady as stone. What you saw at that park wasn't what you threw away. Those children never belonged to you. They've been mine from the moment you handed me those divorce papers. They're my blood. Blood means nothing without presence. Biology means nothing without love. Jessica walked to her desk, picked up a folder, and handed it to him. These are the legal documents my attorney prepared. They outline exactly what rights you have regarding my children. Would you like to guess what's in them? Yang-eun opened the folder with shaking hands. His face went pale as he read. Nothing. This says I have no rights, no claim, no. Exactly. You terminated any claim you might have had the night you chose Minna and her supposed bloodline purity over the woman carrying your children. Jessica took the folder back. Your 5 minutes are up. Please leave. Jessica, wait, please. Yang-eun's composure was crumbling. Let me meet them. Just once. I'll bring gifts. You'll what? Buy their affection? Is that how you think fatherhood works? Jessica's laugh was bitter. You can't purchase love, Yang-eun. You can't negotiate for it or strategize your way into it. Those children have spent 5 years without you. They're happy, healthy, and whole. What exactly do you think you can offer them that they don't already have? Their heritage, their legacy, the Cho name. The Cho name means nothing to them. They're Okonkwo's. They know their heritage, both sides of it. They know their grandfather was a brilliant architect in Lagos. They know their grandmother was a teacher. They know they come from strength and resilience. What they don't know is that their biological father called them a complication and threw their mother away while she was pregnant. And if I have my way, they'll never know that. Yang-eun stood there, and for the first time since Jessica had known him, he looked completely lost. I made a mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. Please let me try to fix it. Some mistakes can't be fixed. They can only be lived with. Jessica opened her office door. Now leave and don't come back. But Yang-eun didn't leave. Instead, over the next 2 weeks, he tried everything. Expensive toys appeared at the children's school, remote-controlled cars, designer dollhouses, educational tablets worth thousands. Jessica donated them all. A trust fund was established in the quadruplets' names with enough wealth to secure their futures 10 times over. Jessica had her attorney freeze it, pending legal review. Then Yang-eun tried something more direct. Jessica was at the construction site when her phone rang. Margaret's voice was tight with controlled panic. Miss Okonkwo, there's a man at the building's entrance. Security stopped him, but he's asking to see the children. He has gifts, large gifts. Keep the children inside. Don't let him near the elevators. I'm on my way. Jessica arrived home 20 minutes later to find Yang-eun in her building's lobby, surrounded by bags from the most expensive toy stores in Seoul. Her security team had formed a wall between him and the residential elevators, and Yang-eun looked both determined and desperate. Jessica, he said when he saw her, please, I just want to give these to them. I want them to know. Know what? That you think affection can be purchased? Jessica walked past him toward the elevator. Take your gifts and leave. I'm their father. Jessica stopped, turned slowly. And when she spoke, her voice was so cold it could have frozen the lobby. You are a biological contributor. That's all. Fathers show up. Fathers do the work. Fathers don't need DNA tests to prove they care. You are none of those things. The elevator doors opened, and Jessica stepped inside. But Yang-eun moved faster than she expected, slipping through the doors before they closed. Security rushed forward, but Jessica held up a hand, stopping them. You have until we reach my floor to say whatever you came to say, she told him. Then you leave and you don't come back. The elevator began its ascent. Yang-eun stood against the far wall, clutching his expensive bags of toys like they were a shield. I want to know them, their names, their interests, what makes them laugh. I want to be part of their lives. You want, you want, you want. Jessica's voice was sharp. What about what they need? What about what's best for them? You think introducing a man who abandoned their mother is good for 4 or 5-year-olds? I didn't know they existed. Because you told me to handle the complication. You knew I was pregnant. You chose not to care what happened next. The elevator dinged, arriving at her floor. This is where you get off, and you don't come back. But as the doors opened, 4 small faces appeared in the hallway. The children had somehow escaped Margaret's supervision and were peering around the doorframe of the apartment, curious about the commotion. Yang-eun froze. So did Jessica. Malik spoke first, his voice clear and curious. Mama, is that the sad man from the park? The one who watches our school? Zuri added, half hiding behind her brother. Amara was bolder, stepping fully into the hallway. Why do you look so sad all the time, mister? Did you lose something important? Youngin's face did something Jessica had never seen before. It crumpled. Just for a moment, all his control shattered, and he looked at these 4 perfect children who had his features and Jessica's eyes, and something broke inside him. Yes, he whispered. I lost something very important. Kofi, the gentlest of the 4, tilted his head. Did you check where you last had it? Mama says we always find things when we remember where we last saw them. I last had it 5 years ago, Yang-eun said, and his voice was raw. And I threw it away because I was too arrogant to see its value. The children looked at each other, having a silent conversation the way siblings do. Then Malik, the protector, stepped forward. Our mama says sometimes people don't know treasure when they see it. She says that's sad for them, but it doesn't make the treasure less valuable. Your mama is very wise, Yang-eun said. Are those toys for us? Amara asked, pointing at the bags. Yang-eun nodded, setting the bags down in the hallway. I thought maybe you might like them. The children approached cautiously, peering into the bags. There were dolls and action figures, building sets and art supplies, books and games. A fortune in toys chosen by someone who didn't know the children at all, who just bought the most expensive version of everything. Zuri picked up a beautiful doll with an elaborate gown. She studied it for a moment, then carefully put it back. It's very pretty, but I don't need it. We have lots of toys already. And Mama says gifts from strangers have strings attached, Malik added, stepping back from the bags. What strings are attached to these? Yang-eun looked like he'd been struck. No strings, I just wanted. You wanted something, Kofi interrupted gently, but we don't know what. And that's scary. Amara, ever direct, crossed her arms. Are you trying to buy us? Because Mama says people who try to buy other people are not good people. Jessica had been watching this entire interaction in silence, but now she spoke. Children, go inside, now. They obeyed immediately, but not before Malik turned back to Yang-eun one last time. You should stop being sad and start being better. That's what Mama always tells us when we make mistakes. Being sad doesn't fix anything. Being better does. The apartment door closed, leaving Jessica and Yang-eun alone in the hallway. They rejected me, Yang-eun said, and he sounded genuinely shocked. I brought them everything they could want, and they rejected me. They rejected manipulation, Jessica corrected. They're 5 years old, and they have better instincts about character than you ever developed. Now take your toys and leave. And Yang-eun, don't come back. Next time, I'll call the police and file formal harassment charges. She walked into her apartment and closed the door, leaving Yang-eun standing in the hallway, surrounded by bags of expensive toys that meant nothing to children who'd learned that love couldn't be purchased. Inside, the quadruplets were gathered around Margaret, who was comforting Zuri, who'd started crying. I didn't mean to be rude, Zuri sobbed, but those toys felt wrong. You weren't rude, baby, Jessica assured her, pulling all 4 children into a hug. You were smart and brave, and you trusted your instincts. I'm so proud of all of you. Who was that man, Mama? Malik asked. Why does he keep following us? Jessica took a breath. She'd known this moment would come eventually, but she hadn't expected it so soon. He's someone from Mama's past, someone who made bad choices and is trying to fix them now. But some things can't be fixed just by wanting them to be. Is he dangerous? Amara asked. No, baby, he's just sad and confused, but that's not our problem to fix. Good, Kofi said decisively, because we have enough to do with school and art class and learning to swim. I hope you're enjoying the story so far. If you are, please make sure you're subscribed because the next part reveals a truth that changes everything. The children accepted this explanation and moved on the way children do, returning to their toys and games. But Jessica stood at the window, watching Yang-eun finally leave her building, the bags of rejected toys still in his hands. She'd won this round. But she had a feeling the war was far from over. What Jessica didn't know was that while Yang-eun was unsuccessfully trying to buy his children's affection, his world was crumbling. Minna had been making moves he hadn't noticed, blinded as he was by his obsession with the quadruplets. The first crack appeared 3 days after the hallway incident. Yang-eun's financial advisor called an emergency meeting. Sir, there are irregularities in several accounts, significant transfers that don't match any authorized transactions. Yang-eun had been distracted, barely listening. Handle it. Sir, I can't handle 300 million won that simply vanished. This requires your immediate attention. That got his attention. Yang-eun spent the next 48 hours tracking the transfers, following digital breadcrumbs that led to offshore accounts, shell companies, and finally, devastatingly, to Minna. She'd been siphoning funds for years, slowly at first, then with increasing boldness. She'd built an entire hidden empire while he'd been too arrogant to notice, too secure in his control to see the betrayal happening under his nose. But it got worse. Yang-eun's security chief brought him a file 3 days later. Sir, you need to see this. It's about Miss Minna. The file contained evidence of communication with rival organizations, strategic information about Cho syndicate operations that had been leaked. Business deals that had mysteriously fallen through could now be traced directly to information Minna had provided to competitors. She hadn't just been stealing his wealth. She'd been systematically dismantling his empire from the inside. Yang-eun sat in his office, staring at the evidence of his colossal failure in judgment. He'd thrown away a loyal wife for a woman who'd been betraying him from the beginning. He'd called his children a complication, while the woman he'd chosen to replace their mother had been plotting his destruction. The irony was so bitter he could taste it. He called Minna that night, his voice controlled but cold. Come to the estate. We need to talk. She arrived an hour later, dressed in clothes he'd paid for, dripping in jewelry he'd gifted her, completely unaware that her careful charade was over. Yang-eun, darling, she purred. I hope this is about finally dealing with that woman and her fake children. I have ideas about how to... Sit down, he interrupted. Something in his voice made her freeze. She sat. Yang-eun placed the file on the table between them. When did you start planning to destroy me? From the beginning, or did that come later? Minna's face went pale beneath her heavy makeup. I don't know what you're talking about. The offshore accounts, the leaked information, the systematic theft of both my wealth and my business intelligence. Yang-eun's voice was dead calm, which was somehow more frightening than anger. I have evidence of everything. I have paper trails that lead directly to you. I have recorded calls. I have bank statements. So I'll ask again, when did you start planning to destroy me? Minna's expression cycled through emotions: panic, calculation, defiance. Finally, she settled on aggression. You were supposed to be mine, completely mine, but you couldn't stop obsessing over that foreign woman and her supposed children. You humiliated me, Yang-eun. You threw me away at that gala 5 years ago when you couldn't even wait until the guests left to start your affair with her. So yes, I took what I deserved. I earned every one I transferred. You were my mistress before I divorced Jessica, Yang-eun said flatly. The videos at the gala weren't the beginning. They were just the first time we got caught. And whose fault was that? You were the one who insisted on having me at the estate during your anniversary party. You were the one who couldn't control yourself. Minna stood, her designer dress swishing. You used me to get rid of a wife who didn't fit your image. You told me I would be your partner, your equal. Instead, you treated me like a decorative object. So yes, I made plans. I took precautions. And now your precious foreign wife is back with children you're desperately claiming are yours, and your empire is crumbling. How does it feel, Yang-eun? How does it feel to have everything you value turned to dust? Get out, Yang-eun said quietly. Pack your things and get out of my house. And Minna? If you're still in Seoul by tomorrow morning, I'll have you arrested. I have enough evidence to put you in prison for a decade. Minna laughed, but there was hysteria in it. You think you can threaten me? I have information that would destroy you. I have proof of every illegal thing you've ever done. If I go down, you go down with me. Then we'll both fall, Yang-un said. But at least I'll have the satisfaction of watching you lose everything too. Minna grabbed her purse and stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the paintings on the walls. Yang-un sat in the silence of his enormous, empty mansion and realized that for the first time in his life, he'd gotten exactly what he deserved. He'd thrown away a diamond for a snake. He'd chosen bloodline purity and ended up with betrayal. He'd discarded loyalty and received treachery in return. And the children he'd called a complication were now the only biological legacy he would ever have, children who'd looked at him with pity and called him the sad man. Yang Yun picked up his phone and called the only person who might understand. Jinho, I need advice. The man who'd once been his rival, who'd helped Jessica escape Seoul 5 years ago, answered on the second ring. Cho Yang-un, I wondered when you'd call. You knew about Minna. I suspected. I tried to tell you years ago, but you were too arrogant to listen. Jinho's voice held no sympathy. What do you want from me? Jessica. How do I fix what I've done to Jessica? Jinho laughed, long and genuine. You don't. You can't. That woman rebuilt herself from ashes you created. She raised 4 children alone. She became one of the most respected architects in the world. And you think you can fix it with an apology and some regret? Then what do? You leave her alone. You let those children grow up without your dysfunction. And you live with what you've done. Jinho paused. Unless you're capable of truly changing, not changing to get her back, but changing because you finally understand that people aren't assets to be managed. Can you do that, Yang-un? Can you actually become someone worthy of those children? Yang-un didn't have an answer. He hung up and sat in his empty mansion, surrounded by expensive furniture and artwork, master of an empire that was crumbling, consumed by the consequences of his own choices. And for the first time in his life, Cho Yang-un cried. The empire is falling, and Yang-un is finally facing the consequences of his choices. Drop a A if you think Jessica should never give him a second chance, or a K if you think he deserves one shot at redemption. Subscribe to see how this story ends. Will Yang-un lose everything, or will he find a way to become the father his children deserve? Before we continue, I want to know your thoughts. Do you think what he did is unforgivable? Share your opinion in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe for the rest of the story, with every single one of you. The Hangang Cultural Complex project had always been more than just architecture to Jessica. It was a statement, a declaration that she'd returned to Seoul not as a victim, but as a force to be reckoned with. What Yang-un didn't know, what no one knew, was just how much power she'd accumulated in 5 years. The project was worth $5 billion. The Cho Syndicate had investments tied to it, shell companies, development funds, construction contracts. Yang-un's empire had fingers in dozens of pies across Seoul's development landscape, and Jessica had spent 3 months quietly mapping every single connection. Now it was time to use that map. She called an emergency meeting with the Seoul Metropolitan Development Authority, the project's international investors, and her own legal team. The conference room was filled with some of the most powerful people in South Korean development, and Jessica stood at the head of the table in an emerald suit that made her look like royalty. Gentlemen, ladies, she began, her voice calm and professional. I've discovered some irregularities in the project's financial structure. Several investment entities have connections to organizations currently under investigation for financial crimes. As lead architect, I cannot in good conscience continue this project until these concerns are resolved. The room erupted in questions. Jessica calmly distributed folders containing meticulously documented evidence of the Cho Syndicate's involvement and the tangled web of corruption that connected them. I'm recommending an immediate freeze of all assets connected to these entities pending a full audit, Jessica continued. Additionally, I'm proposing that any contractors or investors with ties to these organizations be removed from the project entirely. One of the investors, an older man who'd worked with the Cho family for decades, spoke up. Miss Okonkwo, do you understand what you're suggesting? This could delay the project by months, cost millions. I understand that integrity costs money, Jessica replied evenly, but corruption costs more. The choice is yours. Proceed with a clean project, or proceed with one that will eventually implode and take all your reputations with it. The vote was unanimous. Within 48 hours, every asset the Cho syndicate had tied to the Hangang project was frozen. Accounts were locked, contracts were voided, and Yang Yun's carefully constructed financial empire began to collapse like a house of cards. Yang Yun called her that night, his voice raw with disbelief. "What have you done?" "I did my job," Jessica said calmly. "I protected a $5 billion project from criminal contamination. If your business practices can't withstand scrutiny, that's not my problem." "You're destroying me." "No, Yangen, you destroyed yourself. I'm just removing the camouflage you've been hiding behind." Jessica's voice was cold. "You thought power meant you were untouchable. You thought your name gave you immunity. You were wrong." "Jessica, please, we can work this out. I'll do anything." "There's nothing to work out. Your assets are frozen pending investigation. What happens next is up to the authorities." She paused. "Oh, and Yang Yun, expect a delivery tomorrow. Consider it a parting gift." The papers arrived at the Cho estate at 9 a.m., delivered by a legal courier who required Yang Yun's signature. He opened the envelope with shaking hands and read the title, Petition for Termination of Parental Rights. The document was comprehensive, brutal, and legally airtight. It outlined every abandonment, every rejected attempt at contact, every instance where Young'un had proven himself unfit. It included statements from the children's pediatrician, their teachers, their therapist, all testifying that the children were thriving without him and that his sudden appearance in their lives posed a risk to their emotional well-being. Most devastating of all, it included statements from the children themselves. Simple, heartbreaking words that had clearly been given freely, without coaching. "Malik, I don't want a dad who makes my mama sad. The sad man scares me. He watches us like we're things, not people. Amara, we already have everything we need. We have mama and each other. Kofi, I think the sad man needs help, but not from us. He needs to fix himself." Yangen read the document 3 times, each reading feeling like a knife to the chest. Jessica was legally severing any connection he might have to his children. She was erasing him from their lives as completely as he'd erased her 5 years ago. He called his attorney, who delivered more bad news. "Sir, with the asset freeze and the ongoing investigation, we're in a difficult position. The evidence Ms. Okonkwo provided to the authorities is extensive. There are questions about..." "I didn't embezzle anything. That was Minna. But you benefited from it. You had oversight responsibility. In the eyes of the law, you're complicit." The attorney's voice was grave. "Sir, I need to be honest with you. This is bad, very bad. We're looking at potential criminal charges." Yang-un hung up and stared at the termination papers. He could fight them. He could drag Jessica into court, force DNA tests, demand his rights as a biological father. But looking at his children's words, at their clear rejection of him, he realized that winning in court would mean losing them forever. If he fought, they would hate him. If he fought, they would know everything, how he'd abandoned their mother, how he'd called them a complication, how he'd chosen bloodline purity over love. They would know, and they would despise him for it. The choice was simple: destroy any chance of redemption by fighting or accept the consequences of his choices. Yang Yun picked up a pen. His hand shook as he signed the document, officially terminating his parental rights to 4 children he'd never even held. The criminal charges came 3 days later. Not just financial crimes, but a web of illegal activities that Mina had carefully documented before she'd started. She'd kept records of everything as insurance, and when she'd fled Seoul, she'd leaked them all to the authorities in a final act of revenge. Yang Yun was arrested at the Cho estate on a Tuesday morning. The cameras were there. Someone had tipped off the press. He was led out in handcuffs, the mighty Mafia boss reduced to a criminal in expensive clothes. Jessica watched the news coverage from her penthouse, the children at school, unaware that their biological father was being destroyed. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a quiet sense that justice, however imperfect, was being served. Her phone rang. Jinho. "I saw the news," he said. "Did you orchestrate all of this?" "I provided evidence of crimes. What happened after that was up to the legal system." Jessica's voice was calm. "He made his choices. I just made sure he faced the consequences." "And Minna?" "Gone. Fled to Hong Kong, I heard." Jessica paused. "Though I doubt she'll get far. She betrayed too many people, burned too many bridges." Jinho was quiet for a moment. "You've changed. The woman I helped escape 5 years ago would never have done this." "The woman you helped escape 5 years ago is dead," Jessica replied. She died in a ballroom in front of 500 people. I'm what grew from her ashes. Do you think you'll ever forgive him? Jessica considered the question carefully. Forgiveness isn't the point. The point is protecting my children from someone who sees them as assets instead of humans. The point is showing them that actions have consequences, and that no amount of power or money can erase the harm you cause. She paused. Yang Yun taught me that people are either useful or disposable. He's learning that lesson from the other side now. The news broke the next day. Minna had been found, not by authorities, but by rivals, people she'd betrayed during her years of double dealing. The details were murky, but the message was clear. There was no escape from the consequences of her choices either. Jessica didn't celebrate. She simply closed that chapter of her life and focused on what mattered. 2 weeks later, she sat in her attorney's office as Sun Hee handed her the final document. It's done. The court has accepted the termination of parental rights. Cho Yangyun has no legal claim to your children. They're solely yours. Jessica held the paper, feeling its weight. This was protection, this was safety, this was the door to that chapter of her life closing permanently. There's something else, Sun Hee said carefully. Cho Yang-eun was sentenced yesterday, 15 years. Counts. He'll be eligible for parole in 8 years if he behaves well. 15 years. The children would be 20 years old when he got out. Adults. People who would never remember the sad man who'd watched them at the playground, who'd tried to buy their love with expensive toys. Thank you for everything, Sun Hee, Jessica said, standing. Send me your final invoice. I want to close all of this out. That evening, Jessica gathered the children in the living room. They sat around her on the couch, curious about the serious expression on her face. I have something to tell you, she began. Remember the sad man who was following us? They nodded, Zuri instinctively moving closer to Jessica. He won't be following us anymore. He's gone away for a very long time. And I wanted you to know that you're safe. We're all safe. Nothing and no one is going to disrupt our family. Is he the bad man you left Seoul for? Malik asked. He was too perceptive for his age. Jessica chose her words carefully. He's someone who made choices that hurt people, and now he's facing the consequences of those choices. But the important thing is that you're safe, and we can focus on our life together. Are we staying in Seoul? Amara asked. I like my school here. Jessica had been thinking about this for weeks. Seoul held too many ghosts, too many memories, but running felt like admitting defeat, and she was done running. Actually, she said slowly, I've been thinking. The Hangang project will take 3 years. After that, we can go anywhere in the world. Where would you like to go? The children erupted with ideas. Paris, New York, Tokyo, back to London, each suggestion more enthusiastic than the last. We have time to decide, Jessica said, pulling them all close. For now, we have a life to live right here, and we're going to live it fully. 3 months later, Jessica stood at the Hangang project site, watching the first steel beams rise against the Seoul skyline. The building was taking shape, a cultural center that would blend traditional Korean architecture with modern sustainable design, a bridge between heritage and future. It would be her masterpiece, not because of its size or cost, but because of what it represented. A woman who'd been discarded had returned to create something beautiful in the place that had broken her. Her phone buzzed. A message from Margaret. Children asking when you'll be home for dinner. Malik wants to show you his science project. Jessica smiled. This was her empire, not buildings or money or power over others. 4 children who loved her, who trusted her, who called her mama. This was the legacy that mattered. She typed back, tell them I'll be home in an hour, and I'm bringing ice cream. As she drove home through Seoul's evening traffic, Jessica passed the street that led to the Cho estate. She didn't look down it, didn't wonder what had happened to the mansion or the belongings she'd left behind. That life was gone, that Jessica was gone. The woman driving this car was someone new, someone stronger, someone who'd learned that the worst thing that could happen to you could also be the thing that set you free. Yang-eun sat in his cell that same evening, staring at a wall that had become more familiar than he wanted. 15 years. He'd be 53 when he got out, if he got out early for good behavior. His empire was gone. Minna was gone, reportedly having met a fate he didn't want to know the details of. And his children were growing up without him, being raised by a woman who'd proven to be worth more than every person he'd trusted combined. He'd thrown away a diamond for a snake. He'd traded loyalty for bloodline purity, and he'd lost everything that mattered in the process. A guard brought mail, a single envelope, expensive paper. Yang Yun opened it with hands that had grown softer in 3 months of incarceration. Inside was a photograph. 4 children at a park, laughing. Zuri was on a swing. Amara was climbing. Kofi was drawing on a notepad. Malik was watching over them all with protective eyes. On the back, in Jessica's precise handwriting, "They're happy. They're whole. They're everything you could never be. Goodbye, Yang Yun." He stared at the photograph until lights out, memorizing faces that would forget him, studying the joy and expressions that had never needed him. This was his legacy. Children who thrived in his absence, a woman who'd become legendary without him, an empire built on sand that had crumbled the moment real pressure was applied. And somewhere in Seoul, Jessica was tucking those 4 children into bed, reading them stories, kissing their foreheads, giving them the kind of love he'd never understood was worth more than any empire. The end. Jessica won, not by revenge, but by becoming everything Yang Yun said she couldn't be. Drop a if you loved this ending, or aha if you wanted something different. And make sure you're subscribed, because I have more stories of strong women taking back their power coming soon. Comment where you watched this entire journey from. I want to thank every single person who followed Jessica's story from abandonment to triumph.